Thanks for inviting me for this. It's really good to be with European friends and colleagues, particularly at this time. I'm going to be sharing with you some key findings from a report we published just last year, looking at the future-ready university, considering the post-pandemic world and the changes that are going to come to this sort of vital sector. A quick bit of context on us. We're a company of engineers, architects who work around the world. We're made up of acousticians, consultants in economics, sustainability, all kinds of different aspects. We have 89 offices with across 33 different countries. Originally, one of our largest office in London, but most recently we opened a new office in Lima, Peru, for example. Been going for 75 years, and we've got over 15,000 people working with us. And we're one of the largest employee-owned organisations in the world. We're held in trust, no shareholders. We do the work we want for ourselves and our clients to build a better world. Myself, in particular, I'm from part of Arup, actually called Arup University. Our skills and training, R&D, innovation part. Arup University kind of acts as that internal intelligence centre. We work with knowledge management and make sure that all of the learning in the work that we do broadly gets captured and shared across the practice and can be applied so we can do smarter and better projects, improve the communities that we serve. Foresight itself, we collaborate with clients and our colleagues to help understand the trends and the kind of news that are going to identify and define the future markets that we're going to be serving. We self-fund a lot of our own research and foresight studies, so we remain, a trusted advisor to those we work with. But get to the research, which is what you're interested in. We worked with our clients as well as the engineers and architects that work on our education projects. We went to interviews to actually discuss with them what kind of challenges they've been facing, and these were both academics and also maybe primarily estate managers and property managers who have ownership over the actual physical campus. And we took these insights and synthesized them into a findings report to be able to point to the key areas of interest that deserve our attention over the coming years. And this is a list of the universities that we spoke to, just so you can see the breadth and the global reach that we achieved with this. I want to acknowledge that we failed to interview any universities in South America and only one on the continent of Africa, but we hope our findings do have global relevance, understanding, whilst understanding that obviously contexts vary in different places. So those key findings, those key factors, what were they? For today's presentation, I've got 6 here for you, and I'll talk to them in a bit more detail, but first and foremost, unsurprisingly, hybrid teaching, recognizing this massive acceleration. It was happening in different ways beforehand, but it's now the standard of having that hybrid digital and physical teaching environment. Net zero, this is the key factor for environmental benefit. How universities can achieve that is a real challenge. Resilience and its wider implications beyond the pandemic. We've all had to be incredibly resilient, but there's much more to it than that. Commercial pressures are never far away. Operations need to be kind of doing more with less. And the physical campus remains foundational, but it needs to be adaptive. So those points in a bit more detail for you. That idea of hybrid teaching, that mix of digital and in-person teaching, people told us was definitely becoming the norm. Investment in digital technology is going to be needed to actually facilitate that in a proper way, make it smoother. There's so much that we lose from doing in virtual interactions using Teams and Zoom and all of that. You can't see all of my body language. There are so many visual cues, and it adds a level of friction that we need to be really cognizant of. Now, due to that, students expect universities to still offer face-to-face interaction. And then one interesting thing we found is issues of intellectual property and equity of access is really important. If a lecturer has now recorded his entire program, Does the university own that? Can he take that to his next teaching place? These are all big challenges that need to be kind of considered. And finally, it's important to acknowledge that hybrid learning has had an immense impact on accessibility more broadly. There are some communities that have seen accessibility increase and others who've been finding it really challenging. Zero, as I said, is kind of the way that universities see themselves as being able to have an agenda to address the climate crisis. And institutions need to minimise the amount of new construction they do. And what's really interesting actually is that students are the ones that are really pushing for this. I have to give a shout out to the Higher Education Design Quality Forum. There's a fantastic report they did last year, which they asked 1,000 plus students what they were thinking around sustainability on their campuses. And we've got to recognise that students today, this is Greta Thunberg's generation who are arriving on campus, and after the school strike for climate movement, they know what needs to be done. They know it's not plastic straws and paper bags, it's institutional change that's needed, and they're looking to their universities to divest from carbon and to implement actual strategies on campus so that they have the tools in place to be sustainable whilst being students. Now, resilience. Universities, I think, could benefit from considering more about scenario planning. And we've just been through one big scenario of the pandemic that many academics and leaders spoke about. Now we know what we got right and what we got wrong. Beyond this, there remains conflict and economic disruption, cybersecurity, before we even think about the impacts of climate change and what that might bring. Universities need to think about adopting new business models and understanding how they're actually going to be able to respond once again to disruptions that will come, no doubt, in the future. Now, commercial pressures. University finances really have been hit for many during the pandemic, and the lack of movement in people globally, recognizing how migrating to study is really important for many, many people. International student bodies make up the vitality of a university. They also, particularly as the UK context, they make up a big part of the budgets for universities as well. Universities need to think about partners and how they can work with the state to gain better funding and things like that, and think about new business models, ways they can utilize their technology, their insights, their skills, and the invention that is inherent in universities. While some universities have enormous endowments, the vast majority still need to balance the books, and they're a commercial enterprise. So how they go about that whilst remaining key to their mission is key. Now, campus operations, particularly thinking of the estate managers that we spoke to. One of the interesting things we found is that the pandemic meant there was a much broader amount of data that universities were capturing about how their buildings were maintained and used and accessed. Now, even though many of those restrictions may be gone for many of us, we still have those sensors and those frameworks of data that we can use to better understand how to use the spaces that universities have. Also, with those universities, there's an increased desire to think about not just the physical benefits and positivity within the actual spaces, but broader mental well-being things that can come with that, right through from thinking about lighting and fresh air and all kinds of aspects like that. And then recognizing that universities need to be providing space not just for learning, but for socialization, particularly given how important we think, how important we recognize that is after the past 2 years. But as I said earlier on, it's a terrible oxymoron, doing more with less, but it's a challenge that many universities have come to us with, and to do that requires a lot of adaptability and a lot of increased efficiency. Finally, physical campus. So we see the physical campus really remaining key and foundational to universities. No one is taking the past 2 years and thinking, we want more of that, more teams, but better, smoother. everyone is screaming to get back into the classroom and get into that face-to-face interaction and benefit from all of that. That's not to say there aren't still great things to take from it, and universities are going to be looking for innovative ways to have mixed-use spaces and utilize what they have, not just for the normal face-to-face teaching, but do more with that. With the hybrid learning, maybe a course is not limited by the number of seats in a lecture theatre, but there's more to it than that in terms of what spaces for the seminar afterwards can you create to bring more people in. And to actually do that, a lot of it's about adaptability, being able to design buildings so that they can serve us now, but serve us into the future. When we build something, we want it to be around for 100 years or more. That's even more important when we think about climate and net zero. There's nothing worse than demolishing a building and starting again, and all of the embodied carbon that's lost with that. So there are smart ways of doing that, primarily with being flexible and thinking about smart ways to design. So those are the key characteristics that we kind of identified. Our report is available online for anybody to read, and we welcome feedback about what we've sort of discussed and seen. I'm looking forward to discussing it with the rest of the group as well. There was one last thing I wanted to kind of point to, because I know a lot of these conversations we talk about the future of our buildings and universities in particular. We're looking for frameworks to understand ways to think about these things. We find the UN sustainability goals really, really important and really useful to frame our thinking. I just wanted to point to a few that I think are relevant to the discussion. Obviously, SDG 4, quality education, is all about universities, but there's 3 others which I think are also equally important and give a place to universities to really have a fantastic influence. So number 9, thinking of industry, innovation and infrastructure. Universities kind of have so much knowledge and they're all sort of foundational to our innovation economies, but they can do more with that and kind of think about co-location and further collaboration that can be engendered by the spaces that we design and the spaces that universities provide. SDG 10, reduce inequalities. When we think about endemic poverty, education is second only to gender equality in being the key factor that allows one generation to grow and do better than the previous one, to find better opportunities and increase their income. And then 11, cities, sustainable cities and communities. Universities define their communities and how they sit in their city, how they sit in their location, how they work with the broader community is really important. But I'm not going to talk too much on that one because I believe the next speaker is going to be talking on that and I'm really keen to hear from them. So I'll stop there. Thank you for listening.